Hey everybody, welcome back to Movies You Missed Podcast, episode 160 coming at ya. We are going to be discussing two films that I hadn't seen V's pick in quite some time, and V has not seen my pick, so we're keeping in that tradition of last week where V has not seen what I have chosen, so I can't wait to get into that and break the film down. But before we do that, let's discuss how each of us are doing this week. V, how are you today?
I'm doing great and so happy to revisit some classic films and be introduced to one that I should have seen a very long time ago, but hadn't ever gotten around to it, so thank you so much for picking it.
Hell yeah, it's going to be a good discussion. It's going to be a lot of wow moments, especially with the behind the scenes. But before we get into that, like I just said, we are John and V. We have been friends for going on close to 30 years. We were in the entertainment industry for 20 years in multiple capacities, and we are here to discuss films that we feel need to be revisited, flew under the radar, or movies that some people may have just never seen or have forgotten. So here we are today with two movies that I don't know how many people out there have seen, so I'm curious to see what our audience will also think of both of these choices.
Me too.
But before we do that, let's jump into the movies that we went and saw in theaters or stayed at home and watched on streaming this week. V, I'm curious if you saw anything new.
Unfortunately, I didn't see anything new last week, but it was for good reason. I was traveling with my family last weekend.
Oh, very cool.
But I know you saw a couple.
I did, and actually couple is the right term. I saw two new movies over the last week.
Awesome.
Yes, I'll start with the one that I completely hated and have been getting nothing but flack for it over the last week. I went and saw the new Marvel thing called Thunderbolts with Florence Pugh and Wyatt Russell and David Harbour, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus was in it for some strange, odd reason. I don't recall seeing her in any other Marvel movie, but I hated it. I was completely bored. I left to use the restroom, almost went to another movie, but I toughed it out, and I shouldn't have done that either. So, in my personal opinion, I don't think that Thunderbolts is even worth anybody's time.
I was actually pretty surprised by that, given most people I've talked to really enjoyed it.
That, again, I've been getting flack for what my opinion on this movie is all this last week. And a buddy of mine who's a big Marvel fan, who I always tell I'm going to see a Marvel movie, he broke the movie down for me, and after reading his replies to me and everything, and I love Sean, he's a great dude, he's one of our supporters, I still was like, I didn't get any of that from this movie. I just got a completely forced comedic movie with characters that made no sense, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all, and I felt really bad for Florence Pugh, but all opinions are valid.
Yes, I'm very eager to watch it to see where I land on that spectrum.
As am I. I'm very curious what you'll think of this one. And I guess Florence Pugh's character was in Black Widow. I didn't see that.
Mm-hmm.
And
She's the sister.
Yeah, I would have no idea. I haven't seen it. So I guess that also maybe played a factor into me not caring about any of these characters, but I don't know. It was a very lackluster time at the movies. I give it probably a C- D+.
Okay.
And then I went to the movies yesterday to see a movie that I've been really wanting to see because the trailer was really cool, and it's based off a video game of which I have not played because it's a PlayStation game, I think only. I'm not sure if it's actually on Xbox or not, but I went and saw Until Dawn.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, all right. So the premise of this movie is this group of friends, 5 friends, go out to search for one of the lead character's missing sisters, and they get stuck in a house where they relive the same night, similar to Groundhog Day.
Yes,
yeah.
I've seen the trailer.
Yeah. It is fucking badass. I had so much fucking fun. I was the only one in the theater, so I did not feel terrible being very loud about some of the kills and some of the very intense horror moments in this movie. I fucking loved it, and it's certainly I would say it's a movie you could miss because it really is brutal. There are some better kills in this movie than in Hard Eyes, and that's saying a lot because Hard Eyes had some really good ones.
Yeah.
But yes, I really enjoyed Until Dawn, and I think a lot of people should check it out. I don't think it's getting the love it deserves right now, but I certainly had a great time with it.
Awesome. Yes, we've seen the trailer a couple times before several movies in the last couple months at the theaters.
Yes. Yeah, and luckily the trailer that I saw was the same one, and they didn't really tell you anything, and it wasn't Red Band, so I'm very grateful to the studio for not releasing a Red Band trailer and showing us all the good shit.
Awesome.
Yes. All right, I think it's time to dive into V's pick this week, a classic from way back in the day. V, take us on a journey. What do you say?
I'm very excited to do so. I'm sorry we're not going in chronological order this week, but I'm really stoked to jump into my pick. And yes, we are going way back in the day, all the way back to 250 BC, because that's when this story was written.
Yeah.
This movie is based on a book by Apollonius of Rhodes called the Argonautica. Not only did he write that in 250 BC, but he was also the head of the Library of Alexandria.
Oh, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, so Apollonius was a legend of the literary world, and this story that he wrote was turned into a movie in 1963 called Jason and the Argonauts. The screenplay to this movie was adapted by Beverly Cross, who wrote Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger in 1977. That movie has Jane Seymour in it.
Oh, a young Jane Seymour.
Yes, he also wrote or adapted the screenplay for Clash of the Titans in 1981. So if any of you have seen either of those movies that are stop-motion claymation, you'll know the vibe and the style of Jason and the Argonauts, even if you hadn't seen it before. And the cool thing about Beverly Cross was he was married to Maggie Smith for over 20 years until his death in 1998.
Whoa, Maggie Smith.
Yeah, so Beverly Cross was a great screenwriter, great at adapting these classic stories into movies. And so I'm happy to jump into Jason and the Argonauts and tell you a little bit what it's about.
Let's do it.
We are going back to ancient Greece when the gods still existed, Zeus, Hera, all of the gods of Mount Olympus. I love Greek mythology, I always have, and I think that's one of the reasons why I love this movie so much. And in the beginning of this film, we are introduced to Pelaius, a man who is invading a fellow kingdom, and he gets a prophecy saying that he is going to successfully defeat this kingdom, and he's going to become king. However, there is a little bit of a snag.
Pelaius, you will conquer tonight. You will overthrow the kingdom of Thessaly. You will kill the king, Aristo, and wear his crown. You will do all these things without fear or wound, because Zeus commands it.
If I am protected by Zeus, I will have no need of this. I will lay it on the fire as a thank offering to the gods.
Pelaius, it is also foretold that although you will win the throne of Aristo, you will, when Zeus ordains, lose it to one of Aristo's children.
Then Aristo will have no children.
He has 3, Pelaius. 2 daughters, Philomela and Brises, and a son, Jason.
Then 2 daughters and a son will die with their father tonight.
So right away, we're seeing how involved the gods are in human lives and how much they love to meddle. Cut to 20 years later, and we are introduced to Jason, the crown prince of this territory and the rightful ruler. He wants to come back and defeat Pelaius, which makes sense because the guy killed basically Jason's whole family. He's a total dick. And Jason is really motivated to do this now that he's back. However, he needs something to inspire his people. They are poor, they are hungry, their morale is low because Pelaius hasn't been a good ruler. And so before he goes directly at Pelaius, he decides that he is going to go get a mythical golden fleece at the edge of the world. It has the power to heal, it has the power to inspire, and he believes that if he gets this fleece and comes back to his kingdom, not only will he defeat Pelaius, but he will bring prosperity back to his land. And so that's what he does. He holds a games similar to the original Olympics to find the greatest athletes in Greece to help him on this journey. And that's a really cool montage of all these athletes doing these ancient sports that the Olympics were inspired by. We are also introduced to Hercules at this point, so Hercules is part of this story, which is a lot of fun. And now that he has a crew, he needs a ship. He goes to a man named Argos, who is a famous shipbuilder, to build him the finest ship in the seas. And he decides to name it the Argo, hence all of his men being called the Argonauts.
Yes, indeed.
But Jason isn't alone on his quest. In fact, Hera, queen of the gods, has decided that she wants to help him because her and her husband are a couple of teenagers, her husband being Zeus, and love to get into little competitions and little games using humans as pawns. So here is how Hera can help Jason.
I am Hera, queen of the gods, and your protector on this voyage. But my lord Zeus has decreed a limit to the number of times I may help you when you call upon me. Do not speak now. I know what you must ask of me. Does the golden fleece exist? And if so, where is it?
That's 2 questions.
And I shall help him with only one answer. Search in the land of Colchis.
Then it does exist.
And this is all news to Jason because at the time, he actually thought the gods had abandoned humans. So until this time, he had been a bit of a skeptic. But once you are brought up to Mount Olympus by Hermes and talked to Zeus and Hera, you've been shown the truth.
Yep.
And so now Jason is on this quest to sail to the edge of the world, and it is not without its challenges. First, they almost run out of water until they find a small island, the island with Talos. It was the island of the gods where Zeus's forger cast all of his giant bronze statues. And this is where we start getting introduced to the amazing creatures and special effects of this movie. The Argonauts are told not to take anything from this island, but unfortunately Hercules, who's a little arrogant because he's Hercules, decides to take something from a temple. And what he does is wake up one of these giant bronze statues. This is when he wakes up Talos. And this is when I was completely in as a kid. This amazed me. The visual effects, back then I thought they were so cool. I still think they're cool today, honestly. You can tell they're fake, but who cares? The accomplishment in the 60s of the special effects of this movie cannot be dismissed even though it's now in the 2020s. Once they escape Talos, they are sent to Phineus, who has been cursed by the gods. He was a seer, but unfortunately he abused his power. So not only has he been turned blind by Zeus, but every day when he sits down for his lunch, harpies come and harass the shit out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And come on, man, just go inside to eat your food. That's what I always thought.
Yeah, right?
But Jason has made a deal with Phineus that if he helps capture these harpies so he stops getting harassed by him, he will help Jason on his quest. And so that's what the Argonauts do. It's a very, very cool scene. I love the harpy scene. It's one of my favorite scenes of the whole movie. And Phineus then helps Jason by giving him advice on where to travel next. And that's what happens through this entire movie, is that they go from place to place, usually faced with some sort of amazing challenge. And once they overcome that, they can continue on their journey because in the end, they are trying to get to this golden fleece. Finally, they reach Colchis, the land at the end of the world, and this is where Jason meets Medea. And I love this scene because he asks her if she's a priestess, and she goes, "No, I'm a dancer for this temple." And he goes, "Ooh, a dancer?" He's immediately into it. I always love that line so much. But the challenges aren't over for Jason and his Argonauts in order to get the Golden Fleece. And so the rest of the movie is him and his crew trying to get this Golden Fleece, trying to bring it back so he can overthrow Pelias and take his rightful seat on his throne. And so that is Jason and the Argonauts. I love this film. I've loved it since I was under 10. I've been watching it since then. It's such a feat of claymation and stop motion visual effects, and I still love them to this day, and this story is a classic in every sense of the word. And John, I'm so excited to hear about what your recent revisit was like, because I know you haven't seen it in a lot of years.
I have not seen it in a lot of years, probably 25-ish years, maybe even 30. I think I was maybe 10 years old when I watched this movie the first time. I think it was on Turner Classic Movies or AMC or something like that when my grandfather and I were hanging around flipping through the channels. And if I remember correctly, I did not see this movie from the beginning, so I think we were into the moment where they steal the gold and the bronze statue comes to life, and that's really what I remember the most, on top of the skeleton battle later on in the movie. So it was a cool revisit. I will say that it's certainly one of those movies from the 60s where I don't know if any of these actors had ever acted before. But
or since.
Yeah, there was certainly some lackluster acting in this movie. But again, it's from 1963, no big deal. I watched it with an eye for 1963 like I tend to do with movies like this. So it is an impressive movie. I like the practicality of a lot of it. I found it fascinating, though, that there were a lot of larger guys in Greece that probably wouldn't normally have been there. In certain sequences of this movie, I was like, I don't think that guy would actually be there.
Hey,
but,
this isn't 300, okay?
I know, that's what I was saying. I was like, this isn't 300. This isn't really, one of those movies to really nitpick. I really liked a lot of the stop motion, a lot of the claymation in the movie. The practicality was really cool. I liked the Olympic Games sequence with Hercules, and they're doing the disc throwing out to that rock in the middle of the ocean. I thought Hera was gorgeous. I thought Zeus was hilarious. Reminded me of Paul Sorvino. And,
yes, totally.
When I was watching the movie, I was like, "So is this Paul Sorvino?" I didn't IMDb anything for this movie, so I don't think it is Paul Sorvino.
Nope, it's
but
not.
Either way, I had a good time with it. I don't know if I honestly would ever watch it again, but it was a good revisit. It was good to actually finally see it from beginning to end and get to really kind of pay attention and see what the story was really about. Having seen it so long ago, I remember so many cinema documentaries that I would watch between the ages of 8 to even now, and Jason and the Argonauts is one always constantly referenced because of the blend of live action and stop motion. There was a lot of cool effects. I liked the pool that they would, kind of spy on Jason up in the heavens with. I found it interesting that Zeus had a war map and was like basically moving chess pieces along the war map that he had down on planet Earth. So it was cool. I had a good time. I didn't like the guy that played Pelias. I thought he was the weakest of everybody in the movie. But overall, it was fun and enjoyable. So yeah, it was cool. Good revisit. I think it fits well with my pick for this week.
Good. I'm so glad you think it fits well with this week, and I'm glad you gave it a chance. And yes, there is a bit of camp in it just because it's from 1963, because it's supposed to be this Greek epic. And it's funny you say that Pelias is the weakest actor of the bunch, because both Todd Armstrong, who played Jason, who was really hot, by the way, and also Nancy Kovac, who played Medea.
Oh, yeah.
Both of their voices were dubbed.
Oh my gosh, were they really?
Throughout the entire film, because they were both Americans, and the production company decided that they wanted British accents for them.
Interesting. Wow. I guess I didn't notice that. So they did a good job with the dubbing.
Never noticed it growing up. And I still didn't notice it for this week either. So yeah, I'm right there with you. And you're right. The woman who plays Hera is really beautiful. Her name is Honor Blackman. And she was one of the most classic James Bond women in history.
Oh.
Because she played Pussy Galore in Goldfinger.
Yeah. Nice. Fantastic.
I'm not usually into blondes, but she was so hot.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, she is referenced in Trainspotting in one of Sick Boy's whole James Bond breakdowns.
Yes.
He talks about her.
She is. I remember that scene.
AKA Pussy Galore. Yeah. Cool.
Also known as a lot of vagina in Austin Powers.
Yes.
Austin Powers did such a good job with the names of all the women in his movie, just to highlight how ridiculous James Bond women are.
Yep. So awesome.
Yeah, the naming conventions for James Bond are just completely out of this world. And as a kid, I always thought Jason and the Argonauts were the heroes of this film. You always wanted them to succeed. But now watching it as an adult, once they get to Colchis, I'm like, oh, people actually live here and they own this place. You guys are stealing. You guys are such dicks.
Yes, indeed.
So that was a little bit hard for me to see this week, because I hadn't seen this movie in a handful of years, that's for sure.
It is kind of funny when realizations like that happen later on in life when you're an adult and you're like, wait a minute, these guys were the bad guys.
Wait a minute, Ariel's dad was right. She had just met this guy and never talked to him. She should never live.
Yeah, she was totally too young, too.
But back to Jason and the Argonauts, another reason why I like it so much is I think it's really well done in terms of several aspects of the film, including the score. I really like the score of this film.
Score is very cool.
It's big, it's bold, it definitely fits in with the story. And the man who composed the score for Jason and the Argonauts was named Bernard Herrmann. He created the scores for Citizen Kane, the original The Day the Earth Stood Still, Vertigo, North by Northwest, Taxi Driver, and Psycho.
Oh, very cool. Wow, quite the resume for a short period of time.
Yes, Bernard Herrmann made some pretty iconic scores, and I had never heard of him until this week.
I have not heard the name, but I definitely know 95% of those scores. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you may recognize this name, though. This film was directed by Don Chaffee.
I do know that name.
Because he directed your pick of...
Pete's Dragon.
Yes, the original that you reintroduced me to a couple months ago.
Yeah, so good.
And you're right, there is a lot of practicality in this film. Not only did they film in Italy, roughly an hour outside of Palermo, but they also built the Argo. They built the ship that they filmed 80% of this movie in.
Oh, very cool.
And in order to make the Argo work for filming purposes, it was built over a fishing boat that was powered by 3 large Mercedes engines that cost 10% of the film's budget.
Damn.
They sold the ship to 20th Century Fox after filming, and it was used in the movie that you have picked for the future that I've never seen before. I'm very excited for you to introduce me to this film.
Ooh.
It was used in Cleopatra.
Oh, badass.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So we're going to be seeing that ship again in the future.
Yes, we are.
And beyond the monsters I've already talked about, there is the classic scene of all the skeletons rising from the earth and battling the Argonauts. Very, very cool scene. Highly recommend watching the movie just for the amazing visual effects in it. But early stages of the script actually included twin sea monsters, but also a centaur and the three-headed dog Cerberus.
Yeah, very sweet.
I would have loved to see Cerberus in this film.
That would have been pretty badass.
But we did get a glimpse of him in the Hercules Disney animated film.
Oh, hell yeah, that was really fucking cool.
Yeah, when Hercules goes down to have a conversation with Hades.
Yeah.
And while filming the Argo off the coast of Italy, a replica of the Golden Hind sailed into view. That is the ship that Sir Francis Drake took back in the day when he was exploring the Americas, because they were filming a movie called Sir Francis Drake.
Well, that is a strange coincidence. A few months ago, Amy and I were in a small bookshop in town, and I got a massive book called The Secret Voyages of Sir Francis Drake.
Oh.
I have not read it yet, but I cannot wait to.
Very
now
cool.
I'm even more excited. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so badass. What a crazy coincidence that is.
Also, I want to see the 1961 movie Sir Francis Drake.
Well, I will definitely want to watch that after I read this book.
And so, unfortunately, both production teams had decided to film in their ships in the same location. And so the producer for Jason and the Argonauts shouted, "Get that ship out of here! You're in the wrong century!"
That's kind of similar to what happened during the shooting of No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood. They were within miles of each other.
Really?
Yep.
Yep, wrong time period. Get out of the shots.
Exactly.
I always loved that on set when you're filming and then someone in like a prairie costume walked by behind the scene
Yeah.
because somebody was shooting something else in another soundstage. I loved that. But let's dive into what really makes this movie famous, why we still talk about it to this day, and that is the claymation stop motion that was used for it. Ray Harryhausen, who was born in 1920 and lived till 2013, he passed away when he was 92,
Wow.
was legendary in the film industry for doing claymation animation and stop motion animation for visual effects for movies. He did all three Sinbad movies that I think are very good because they're the Sinbad movies from the 50s and 70s, not the one you watched.
That's good.
They all have amazing claymation stop motion monsters in them. The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, and Sinbad in the Eye of the Tiger. And he also did Clash of the Titans that came out in 1981 that I will probably be putting on this list because I really love that film. And Maggie Smith is in it, actually.
Oh, cool.
Which is great. And the giant Talus puppet is actually 14 inches tall.
Nice.
And the liquid coming out of his foot is actually red cellophane. That's what they used for that special effect.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was animated by Ray to look like flowing blood. And it took Ray Harryhausen 4 months to produce the skeleton scene, which runs at most 3 minutes of the movie.
That is so insane.
That's just dedication
So
that I don't
much
have.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? That is absolute patience and tenacity and just complete drive and passion.
Well, the problem I would have is that I'd get really frustrated by the tediousness of it, and I'd screw something up, and so then I'd get pissed and like grab the claymation and throw it on the ground or something and be like, "Damn it!"
I probably would do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Ray Harryhausen has regarded Jason and the Argonauts as his best film and proudest achievement because of all the different special effects he did throughout the movie. He also helped develop the film itself in pre-production, and he helped cast the film. So he had his hand in many different aspects of the making of this movie, which is great.
Yeah.
And in 1992, he was awarded the Gordon E. Sawyer Academy Award. It is for an individual in the motion picture industry whose technological contributions have brought credit to the industry. And so I'm really stoked that he got an honorary Oscar because he absolutely deserved it.
Yes, he most certainly did.
And upon receiving his award at the Science and Technical Ceremony in 1992, Tom Hanks, who presented this award to Ray Harryhausen, said, "Some people say Citizen Kane or Casablanca. I say Jason and the Argonauts is the greatest movie ever made."
Wow.
So Tom Hanks is a
That's
fan.
some high praise.
Yeah. So I love this film. It was made for between $2.5 and $3 million. I don't have any box office info on it, unfortunately, but we do know that 10% of that budget was used for building the Argo.
Yeah.
And I've loved this movie ever since I was a kid. I will continue watching it because I love these epic, grand stories. I love the OG visual effects of claymation and stop-motion animation, so I will always be an advocate and fan for this film. Thank you so much for taking the time to revisit it this week. I'm sorry you didn't have as good a time as me, but I'm glad that at least you had a good time.
Definitely. I'm glad that I was able to revisit it and watch it from beginning to end and have a good time with it.
Awesome. Well, now I think it's time to rewind 30 years from 1963 so we can talk about John's film this week.
Sounds good to me. Let's do it. Let's push rewind and get back to 1933 when things were black and white, where Ray Harryhausen was also involved in my film. We will discuss this film that is written by Ruth Rose, one of the first female screenwriters in history.
That is fantastic.
Yes. Screenplay was also written by James Ashmore Creelman, and the idea spawned from Marion C. Cooper and Edgar Wallace. This film is the original eighth wonder of the world, King Kong.
I'm so excited to have finally checked this movie off my list of classic films I need to see.
I am as well. I had seen this movie similarly to how I had seen Jason and the Argonauts. I watched it back when I was probably 9 or 10 years old on AMC or Turner Classic Movies, and I was completely captivated by it. Now, granted, I had already seen the greatest film of all time ever made, Jurassic Park. I had seen so many wonderful animated Disney movies, but this was one of those movies that I knew was a very important piece of cinema because of the way that it was made and the fact that it is King Kong, and everybody in the world knows about King Kong. Regardless if you don't know of the version from 1933, which we are discussing today, there's the King Kong from Peter Jackson. There is now the Monarch series of movies where we have Kong Skull Island and Godzilla vs. Kong, and then now Godzilla, Kong, A New Empire. There's going to be a new one, and also the Monarch series on Apple TV, which I will never stop talking about because it's so fan-freaking-tastic. But anyway, let's discuss the 1933 version of King Kong. This film stars Fay Wray, Robert Armstrong, Bruce Cabot, Frank Reicher, Sam Hardy, Noble Johnson, Steve Clemente, and a whole handful of other actors from way back in the day. This film is set in present day of 1933. This film centers on Carl Denham and his crew of people. He is a film director, and he's wanting to put together a movie and take a voyage out into the middle of the ocean and start this movie project to show people things they have never seen before, which is very similar to King Kong, if you think about it, because people at the time had never seen something like this before.
Yes, the whole time watching this film, the main thought I had was audiences at the time must have been losing their minds.
Oh, hell yeah, and we'll get into that in just a little bit.
Awesome.
So Carl Denham is telling his boat captain and a couple of crew members that he really needs an actress for this movie. So he decides that he's going to go find one himself on the streets of New York, because that's how everybody was discovered back in the early 1900s.
Probably.
Oddly, and what's actually kind of entertaining about how Carl Denham meets Ann Darrow, who's played by Fay Wray, is almost an Aladdin situation. She's about to steal an apple. The proprietor of the fruit stand is about to call police and get her arrested. Carl Denham jumps in, says, "No, don't arrest her. She's just hungry. Don't worry about it. I know this woman. I'll take care of her." He takes her to a cafe, starts telling her his big, grand idea of making a movie, showing the world and America things that they'd never seen, and he thinks that Ann Darrow would be the perfect woman to be in this movie. He wants to cast her right then and there. She just has to agree to go on a strange boat with him and a whole bunch of other strange men to some strange island out in the middle of nowhere and make a movie that hopefully will bring her fame, fortune, and Carl Denham enough fame and fortune to make his next big picture.
Seems legit.
Absolutely. It's 1933. Everything was safe back then.
Sure, it's all gonna be fine.
100%. Absolutely. Everybody's going to be fine. Nobody's going to get killed. They're not going to find anything super scary, etc. So what does Anne do? She agrees. She gets on the boat. This is when she meets Jack Driscoll, played by Bruce Cabot. He's very skeptical about this. He doesn't know where this woman came from. He just thinks Carl Denham is just kind of starting to get a little bit too out of his mind. He's got some delusions of grandeur. He's going to be the voice of reason and Ann Darrow's protector, because Carl Denham is basically just going to throw her out into the middle of the ocean to make a movie.
Yeah, but this guy's got the casual misogyny in this movie is really over the top. I love the first scene he has with Anne. He's like, "Just being around you is trouble. Women can't help but be a bother."
Yeah, yep.
So many lines like that throughout this film.
Oh, yeah. Very early on.
And it had a female screenwriter. What the fuck?
Yeah. Well, plays on the times. I think Ruth did a very good job at getting that across.
Yeah, that's fair.
The cool thing about Ruth is actually she was involved in Ernest Shostak, who was one of the directors, and Marion C. Cooper was also another director on this movie. So there were multiple directors on this movie, and I just want to talk about them really quick because their story is extremely fascinating. Marion Cooper was a prisoner of war. He escaped being a prisoner of war and ultimately went back to become a fighter pilot in World War I, and that's where he met Ernest Shostak. And then after they left the war, they decided they were going to make documentaries. So they wanted to go to the island of Komodo to shoot the Komodo dragons, and they wanted to go shoot
there.
these. Have you really? Wow, good for you. I would love to go out there and see
It's
some Komodo dragons.
Badass. Those creatures
bet.
are incredible.
Yeah, I've seen videos of them eating things alive, and that's just super fascinating too.
So the young juveniles of Komodo dragons have to be able to climb trees because the adults will eat them, and the adults are too heavy to climb trees. So through evolution, that's how the juveniles survive into adulthood.
Wow. So the ones that are alive climb trees and we're able to stay away from the adults. Stay out of cannibalism's way.
Yes, exactly.
That's crazy. That's fucking crazy. I had no idea. So these two, Cooper and Shostak, they spent a lot of time making documentaries, and then they figured, you know what, let's get out of the world of documentaries and make some Hollywood pictures. And this is how they got King Kong off the ground. And there's actually a 2.5-hour documentary on the special edition of King Kong DVD that I have that explains all this. On top of that, on disc 2, there are 7 other documentaries about these two men and the documentaries that they made. Extremely fascinating stuff, especially after World War I up until just about World War II.
That sounds like it. How cool. I'm so glad they had all of that extra film and features given how old the movie is. That's amazing.
It's really, really cool. And on the documentary, there's so many audio clips of Marion C. Cooper and Ernest Shostak talking about the early production and their early ideas for King Kong, the breakdown of the story, how they came up with the script and then hired Ruth and hired James. It's really just, to think about it happening all back then and then seeing this movie come to life is... Again, it's movie magic. There's nothing else you can really say other than that this is really one of those magical pieces of cinema that not only captivated audiences in 1933, it still captivates people now because of the way that it was made and the fact that this was able to be sold to audiences as like this. Well, King Kong is actually only 18 inches. He's not this big, but audiences just like the first time they ever saw a train coming into the station, they ducked thinking that the train was going to come flying out of the screen. People thought that King Kong was going to come flying out of the screen, but we'll get into that in just a little bit.
Especially because King Kong, this was an original idea, right? This isn't based on anything, and now, still, almost 100 years later, because it's more than 90 years later.
92 years later, to be exact.
King Kong's story is still being told in different versions and different iterations. Like you said, the Monarch series, Godzilla vs. Kong. There are other King Kong movies that you and I are picking for the future. That's so incredible how impactful their screenplay had on storytelling and cinema.
I completely agree. It's pretty badass. So at this point now in the movie, they have reached Skull Island. Carl's telling everybody, get the cameras ready. We're going to go out onto the shore. We're going to meet some of the natives. And of course, we are treated to this crazy sacrificial moment where the natives are trying to give up a woman to something behind the big gates. Very similar to like Jurassic Park, you know, which is one of my favorite lines and just about everybody's favorite lines spoken by Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. What do you think they got in there? King Kong?
Now I finally understand that reference.
There we go. Perfect.
Because when I was watching this scene for the very first time in King Kong, that set is incredible. First and foremost, those doors. And the only thing I could think of is, oh, this is where Jurassic Park gets it. Okay, this is just like the goat scene. Got it.
Yeah. Exactly. So they are on the mainland, and the chief of the natives ends up seeing Andara with the crew. He concocts a plan to kidnap Anne from these guys once everybody goes to bed to rest for the day to wake up and start shooting more of this project. They successfully kidnap Anne and put her up for sacrifice. And this is when we are treated to the first sights of King Kong, this magnificently huge ape on Skull Island. He takes Anne with him, and for the rest of the movie, we are along for the ride while Carl Denham and Driscoll try and track down Anne and track down King Kong and go through through this jungle on Skull Island, completely getting sidetracked by not only the wilderness, but the creatures that they are introduced to and have to ultimately survive that they had no idea existed. And of course, we as an audience had no idea these things existed either. So that is the story of King Kong. Like I said, if you haven't seen the original, you might have seen the newer version from Peter Jackson, which was 3 hours long. But we'll get into the reason why it was a little bit longer than this one in just a little bit. I have been a big fan of this movie. I remember when I asked for this movie for Christmas several years ago when the DVD edition came out, my mom was like, "Why do you want King Kong?" I was like, "Well, it's a classic, and I just haven't seen it since I was a kid, and it's never really on TV, so I'd like to own a version of it." And I got it that year for Christmas, and I've watched it several times since. And this revisit was so great because not only was this the first time I ever watched the documentary on the making of, I did my research for this podcast so I could tell everybody a little bit more about the production of it and the behind the scenes. It's just such an impressive piece, and I know I've said that so many times about movies that I've chosen here, but this truly is like just similar to Mary Poppins and Pete's Dragon, the mesh of animation and live action, but this being stop motion from 1933 is absolutely mind-boggling. So, V, I know you've never seen it, so let's hear what you have to say about King Kong from 1933.
Well, I think that's the reason we pick movies for this podcast, because they are impressive. So I think that actually
Very true.
is the definition of movies we pick. So I think that's okay that you think movie is impressive. I think so too. I think this movie is historically important, but beyond that, also really entertaining. I cannot believe how much fun I had with this movie from 1933. I was surprised at how long it was going to be, over an hour and a half long. It was almost, it was nearing 2 hours, and I was like, holy shit, how did they make a movie that long back in the day? And that's impressive. And the woman who played Anne Darrow, her name is Fay Ray, is that it?
Yes, Fay Ray.
Nice. I like that alliteration. She is so good at screaming, I accidentally wrote it twice in my notes.
Yeah, her scream is pretty intense.
And similar to my movie, when a man and woman meet, hey, I just met you, and this is crazy, but I love you.
But I love you. Yep. Yep.
This is what Frozen was talking about when she said, "No, you can't marry him. You just met him."
Exactly.
So I thought that was
Jack had the hots for Anne Darrow, that's for sure.
after insulting the shit out of her in the first scene.
Yep.
But yeah, I thought
she just didn't back down. Like, she definitely had her own personality and convictions, which was pretty cool.
Yes.
You know, because a lot of times in certain movies, maybe not exactly like monster movies like this, but some of those other movies, you know, they make the women very coy and whatnot, and she was not like that at all.
Or how many movies have we talked about, not that we've picked for the show, but just movies in general that we talk about there, we say, oh yeah, in the entire movie there's one woman, right?
Yep.
And at least they had a little bit of agency for her that I did like her character a lot, so I was very happy with that. But I didn't know what to expect with this movie other than King Kong, Empire State Building. That's about all I knew, right? Because that is a classic shot.
Oh, yeah.
So when they get on Skull Island, of course, I've made the connection when I was watching the movie that, oh, Kong Skull Island, got it. That was kind of an origin story. Makes sense. Also going to be on the list in the future because Kong Skull Island is an incredible action movie.
Yes, it is.
So when they're going after Kong to get Anne back and they encounter all these monsters, I was like, oh shit, I cannot imagine what this would have been like in the theaters in 1933. Had anyone even seen what a T-Rex looks like yet? Had that fossil been, how recent had that fossil been discovered? It must have been kind of new, so it was kind of really incredible. But all of the monsters they encounter, it's a Stegosaurus. Cool, let's shoot it. Like, God, they're such dicks.
They really are.
So I like that there were a lot of different monsters in this movie because it certainly took me by surprise.
Oh, yeah.
But it definitely is a lens of the 30s, not only with the misogyny, but also how they treat the natives in this film.
Very much so.
And I've always had a lot of sympathy for Kong, poor guy. He was just minding his own business, getting his sacrifices every week like they agreed upon, and then this film crew comes in and invades his space. But really, though, I had a great time with this film. I'm so glad you picked it for this week. It's such an incredible piece of cinema, and I'm so glad to finally have watched it. Just the historical significance of it. I know I've said it already, but it is worth mentioning again. Is worth watching this film, so I highly, highly recommend it.
Absolutely agree. I'm glad you had a good time with it. It is certainly a revisitable movie, especially being from 1933. I think this is maybe the 7th or 8th time that I've watched the original one. So I tend to want to watch it every couple years because just to watch it again, it's just like any other movie. Like, why would you watch it again? Because it's entertaining, and this is absolutely entertainment.
I think it's one of those films, along with several other black and white monster movies, that would be great to put up on a projector on the side of your house when you're having a barbecue on a Saturday with like 20 friends. And you don't even need to have the sound on. It just keeps playing in the background. It's just so fun to see the images of this classic film.
It's funny you say that. There was a bar that I used to go to all the time in Hollywood off of Hollywood and Vine. It was called Lost Property, and they always played old movies, black and white movies. They never played any color movies, but King Kong was on at least 3 different times when I went in that place. And it was so cool to sit there and have a cocktail and just no, I don't know the movie by heart, but it's just, you don't really necessarily need the dialogue. Like you said, it can be completely sold as a silent film with whatever music is playing inside the bar.
Totally.
And that place played usually jazz or like upbeat, like big band type music. So it kind of in a weird way fit. Sweet. Well, I'm glad that you had a good time. Let's get into some of the BTS of this movie. I have a good amount of it, but I'm not going to go too deep into it because I kind of would want some other people to be watch the documentary on the making of this movie because it's just so fascinating, and I'd really like to just kind of talk more back and forth about certain sequences in this movie. One of them in particular being the pterodactyl battle between King Kong and the Tyrannosaurus Rex battle between King Kong. When I watched the T-Rex battle this time around, I actually was pretty disturbed at how it ended. And I've seen this movie before, but for whatever reason, this time around, I got super worked up because of how violent it was. And it was so convincing that this is an actual gorilla taking down a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And I also probably got worked up because I love T-Rex and I love Jurassic Park. So seeing my guy or my girl, because most of the dinosaurs were female, at least in Jurassic Park, got taken down by this big ass ape, and he was just trying to protect Anne because he fell in love with her, and he just was so entranced by her beauty and her blonde hair, which actually was a wig. Fay Wray was actually a brunette, and she suggested to the directors that she be blonde in the movie. So she ended up going through, I think, 15 or 20 different wig tests before they found the one that they actually ended up using for this movie.
Which totally makes sense because the natives would be more enthralled by her because they'd never seen a blonde woman before. And
exactly.
My friend who went to Japan in the 80s, he was 6'1" and had blonde curly hair, and all of the kids at the school he volunteered at were just staring at him all the time because they hadn't seen a really tall guy, especially with blonde hair, before. And
sure.
They called him Godzilla. It was super cute when he played with them on the playground.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Now, those scenes and all of the scenes with Godzilla and all the creatures are all stop motion done. And we've talked stop motion here before. We've done James and the Giant Peach, and I've done Coraline. So we've gotten into the production side of doing stop motion animation. But for this one in particular, it just kind of blew my mind a little bit. Similarly to now, stop motion is shot one frame at a time. Whereas nowadays, when they're doing stop motion, the animator doesn't need to leave the scene. They can pretty much just animate in front of the camera and then get digitally removed, whereas that was impossible to do back then.
God.
So they had to do it one frame by frame for however long it took. The sequence with the pterodactyl took 7 weeks to animate.
I believe it.
Me too. Same with the Tyrannosaurus Rex, about 6 to 7 weeks to do that one. And for an entire afternoon of animating a sequence, they would get about a second worth of film.
And this is why I would never be a stop-motion animator.
Yep, so Ray Harryhausen and his team, they were fantastic at doing their jobs, and they really sold all of the animation in this movie. The puppet that Godzilla was 14 to 19 inches big. There was a metal skeleton inside. They used rabbit fur and latex and rubber to bring him more to life. Same with the dinosaurs as well, and the pterodactyl, and the other creatures in this movie. And I'm sure, V, you recognize the one that was kind of the lizard-like from Kong Skull Island.
I did recognize that one.
I thought that was actually pretty cool to see that kind of creature in this one, because so many of the newer movies, like, oh, we're going to take our own liberties, but I feel like Kong Skull Island stuck to a lot of the OG creatures, especially from this version of King Kong.
Yes, it was very loyal to the original, for sure. It's probably why it was so damn good.
Yeah. There's moments in this movie where Fay Wray and Darrow is in the grips of King Kong. Those were shot by her being lifted onto a crane where the hand was at the end of the crane. She was 10 feet up in the air. They would close the hand on her, and every time they moved the crane, she would start to get loose. So all of the terror and screaming that we hear and see in this movie while she's in the grips of King Kong's hand is all real because she was afraid she was going to fall 10 feet to the ground.
Yeah, it's not like she had the SAG union to help her out back then.
I know, exactly. King Kong's roar is pretty historic in this movie as well. They ended up using a lion and a tiger slowed down and ran that growl backwards. So that's how we get King Kong's growl in this movie, which is pretty intense and intimidating, especially when I watched it very nice and loud at 2 o'clock in the morning in my house.
It certainly sounds like what I would imagine King Kong would sound like.
Right, exactly, yes. This movie ended up saving RKO from bankruptcy. I'll get into the numbers in just a little bit. This was also the very first Hollywood film to include a fully symphonic score with a 46-piece orchestra conducted by Max Steiner.
Ooh, that's a really cool piece of trivia. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, I love the soundtrack in this movie. I think it's awesome. It's totally
great.
Totally awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And V, you said that this is a very important film, and you're absolutely right, because in 1991, the National Film Registry, this movie was inducted into the U.S. Library of Congress.
Perfect.
So many of my picks have been.
Yes.
I think a couple of yours have also.
Mm-hmm.
There was also a sequence in this movie that is in the Peter Jackson version of King Kong. There was supposed to be a spider pit sequence in this movie. A lot of people and historians were convinced that it was lost, but they were actually able to find stills from the film reel that it was shot on. It just never made it into a final cut of the movie. So the spider sequence, if anybody's out there saying that it never existed, it absolutely did. They just never included it in the final product.
Yeah, it makes sense that there were more monsters that they thought of in the script that they ended up including in the movie.
Mm-hmm. And the scene in the Peter Jackson version is really terrifying. I've only seen the Peter Jackson version twice. It is 3 hours long, so it is a bit tedious because Peter Jackson, I guess, after Lord of the Rings, can't make a movie that's an hour and a half. But it was definitely a scary moment in the movie. And I never did actually see the Peter Jackson King Kong in theaters. I really wanted to, but I never got a chance to.
And Jack Black is in that movie, right?
Yep, Jack Black, Adrian Brody, Naomi Watts.
Watts, yep, she's the blonde.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
She's the Andero character. Yes.
Perfect casting.
Oh, absolutely.
And Jack Black plays the director?
Jack Black plays Carl Denham,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's not a bad movie. It's just really long. And it's kind of like, I can see why in 1933 they cut out the spider pit sequence. It would have added another 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
There is a body count in this movie. The body count reached 40 for this movie. So 40 men were killed in the production. Well, not in the production. I shouldn't say production of this movie. In the runtime of King Kong, 40 men perished on Skull Island while looking for Ann Darrow. So thanks, Anne.
Well,
It's not really her fault. But.
No, it wasn't her fault. But I will say multiple people got killed in New York as well.
Oh, you better believe it. Yes, that whole train sequence actually scared people to the point where they had to leave the theater and they were passing out, similar to The Exorcist in the 70s.
Cool.
People were just completely freaked out that this monstrous ape was destroying an elevated train. And what's crazy is, I'm sure you remember this, and everybody our age and a little older, when you would do the studio tour at Universal Studios, there would be that badass King Kong stage where King Kong was just trying to rip and trying to get to. I'll never forget that. And the fact, I remember when they took it out, it was so sad, but it is what it is. Now, everything's got to change, but it was still... I think they should have kept it. I mean, they kept Jaws, for crying out loud. King Kong is almost as impactful, if not more than Jaws, and I still like Jaws.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think it's part of our discourse as much as Jaws still is, but...
Yeah, that's true. There were such intense shooting days on this movie that they would stretch up to 20 hours. Oof. And after they got the crew and cast inside sound stages, they would lock the sound stages and not let anybody out, mainly because they didn't want any of the foliage to move during certain sequences. They didn't want any wind or rain to be even picked up on screen. So I've been in sound stages for 20 hours, and it's very cabin feverish. So I can only imagine how people felt at the end of these days. days.
Yeah, that must have been a fire code violation.
I can imagine that it was, yes. MGM offered to pick up King Kong for $1 million from RKO because RKO was in a lot of financial trouble at the time. RKO ended up declining and saying that they are just going to play their cards and see what happens once King Kong hits the theaters. And luckily, like I had just mentioned, RKO was saved from bankruptcy due to the success of King Kong. In its first initial couple of weeks, it pulled in $2.8 million.
Holy shit. That's a lot for back then.
Especially during the time of the Depression.
Oh,
so to think about the
shit.
fact that people were going to the movies to see this. During the production of this movie, 238,000 feet of film was shot.
Ooh, that's sexy.
Yeah. During the cutting process, they were able to cut it down to 14 reels, and only 10,000 feet of film was used to actually project the finished product of the movie.
Jesus Christ.
They cut out a lot.
Yeah, they really did. But at least they got it all.
They did. This movie is on the list of 1001 movies to see before you die, which I absolutely, completely agree with. This film is number 41 on AFI's top 100 films.
Rightly so.
It is the 47th greatest film of all time, according to Entertainment Weekly.
Oh, cool.
Yes, and this film, how long do you think this film actually took to shoot, V? In the entirety of the production, how long would you say?
Well, I think the live action probably didn't take that long, but the stop motion certainly did. So
Yes.
I would guess 10 months all told.
Wow, you're close. It was a year and 3 weeks.
There we go. Okay.
55 weeks of production on this movie. And actually what was very cool to find out was that both Cooper and Shostak, they worked completely differently. So Cooper was very meticulous with when he wanted to shoot the live action stuff. Ernest Shostak was not so meticulous. He wanted to kind of shoot fast. He wanted to let the cast improvise and just have a lot of fun on set. So what they did was they divided themselves. Cooper directed all of the stop motion animation, and Shostak directed all of the live action stuff.
That is a good way to divvy it up based on their personalities.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And the way that they ended up matting most of King Kong into a lot of the sequences was they, similar to Pete's Dragon, they ran 2 strips of film in the camera at once. So when they did finally develop the stop motion animation, they would lay in that strip of film on top of the strip of film that they were shooting the live action stuff on. And that's how we got a lot of the matting and in-camera action, which is absolutely out of control for 1933 to think about.
Just being able to line everything up is an achievement, let alone everything
exactly.
else.
Yeah, the scene where Kong actually goes through the village and breaks down that whole that high stack, that was all done in camera, basically. Insane.
Wow. I was also thinking of the stage too.
Oh yeah, the stage, that was done exactly that same way as well.
That's a good scene.
This film came out on April 7th of 1933. We almost dropped this episode a full 92 years exactly.
Very cool. Oh, that's awesome.
Yes. Now, V, what do you think the budget for King Kong in 1933 was?
I'm going to guess it was similar to my film. I'm going to guess $1.5 million.
You are off by quite a bit. The budget for King Kong in 1933 was only $675,000.
Holy hell, that's impressive that they were able to do all of that.
Yeah,
For only
I agree.
$600,000. Wow.
And what do you think the highest grossing film of 1933 was?
It had to be King Kong.
It was King Kong, bringing in $10 million freaking dollars.
Oh my God. Now that's a return.
Yes, it is. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the 8th wonder of the world, King Kong. Check it out. You can rent it on Amazon or Apple. Like I said, I watched my DVD copy. It is a masterpiece, deserves to be seen by everybody. It is an absolute fantastic film, and I'm so glad that I was able to introduce UV to it and do it on this podcast.
Yes, me too. Had a really good time with it.
I'm so glad. So that is our episode of Classics, Jason and the Argonauts and King Kong. Thank you guys so much for joining us. V, I'm curious though, and you probably already have, but have you seen, or would you watch Jason and the Argonauts with your grandmother?
Oh yeah, I watched it a bunch of times with my dad's mom. This is a very family-friendly adventure film. Highly recommend it to anyone.
Sweet.
But unfortunately, you can only rent it right now, so that sucks. But definitely worth the price of admission. John, would you watch King Kong with your grandma?
Yes, I believe I did at least one time.
Great.
Well, thank you guys again for joining us. Next week is going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to jumping into these movies. V, do you want to tell everybody what we're doing next week?
Yes, I've been looking forward to this all year because this is a very special Mother's Day episode where our moms picked our movies.
Yeah.
And our mothers do not know each other.
No, they don't.
They have never met, and each sent their lists of movies to each of us separately, and then John and I alone picked our movies. And both of these movies just happened to star George Clooney.
And be directed by him, too.
So this is a George Clooney Moms episode.
Yeah.
We're definitely looking forward to it. And my mother, Susan, picked Good Night and Good Luck.
I have not seen this movie in a long time. I saw it in theaters. I saw it at a small theater in Santa Monica with a buddy of mine when it first came out. So I have seen it several times before, but it's been a while for me, so I'm looking forward to it.
I've only seen 2 scenes of this movie on YouTube that somebody shared with me. I've actually have not seen this film all the way through. I'm very excited to not only watch it for the first time fully, but also discuss it on this podcast.
Sweet.
And what George Clooney movie did your mom choose?
My mom sent me a movie with George Clooney, and Matt Damon and Bill Murray and John Goodman and Bill Balaban and some other people as well. This is The Monuments Men, based on a true story, and I have not seen this movie before, so I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Me either. We are going completely blind in this film.
All right.
It's the first time ever on this podcast.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Mom, for the rec.
Yeah, ditto.
All right, everybody, so we will see you next week for episode 161. Please do rate, review, subscribe, follow us on all social media. Give us a comment on Apple, because if you win, then you get a viewing party with V and I. That's going to be fun. So until next time, everybody, film is a form of art, and art, all opinions are valid, except if you think.
The full CGI movies that they're producing today is an improvement on stop-motion claymation.
Ah, that's a good one. I like that.
Thanks. And before we go, I'd like to give a special shout out to one of our fans. I am so pleased with the opportunity to meet Britt this weekend for the very first time. She is a loyal listener of ours, and I've been looking forward to this for a while. So, Britt, I'm really excited to meet you this weekend.
Sweet. I will not be there, but I'm sure you all will have so much fun.
You're not
Britt
invited.
is quite the gay. I know I'm not invited.
Girls trip, books and friendship bracelets and books. And concerts and books.
I know you're jealous.
Just a little bit, but not really.
But you are.
All right, guys. Well, Britt, V, we'll see you this weekend. We'll see everybody else next week for another episode of Movies You Missed Podcast. Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.